Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here. Today, we have three exceptional nominees on the agenda. Neil Gorsuch to be Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Rod Rosenstein Stein to be Deputy Attorney General, Rachel Brand to be Associate Attorney General. All three of these are on the agenda for the first time. I understand that the minority would like to hold them over. Of course, any member may hold over nominations under our rules on the agenda the first time they're on the agenda. All three nominations will be held over for 1 week. As you all know, last week the committee held a 4-day hearing to consider Judge Gorsuch's nomination. He testified for 2 days and over 20 hours. Before the hearing started, we all knew how qualified the judge is. His resume speaks for itself. But last week we got to see up close how thoughtful, how articulate, and how humble he is. He's clearly deeply committed to being fair and impartial judge, and he isn't willing to compromise the independence to win votes in the Senate. I'll have a lot more to say on this issue next week when we debate his nomination in the committee. I thank all of my colleagues for working with me to make last week's hearing run very smoothly. Almost everybody stayed within their time period, and everybody was courteous. And I thank you, Senator Feinstein, for, and of course your staff, for all the hard work and coordination that you put in to get us through those 4 days last week. Now to Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to say informally a couple of things that I think that have affected this, that I'm not sure the majority understands, or if they do understand, cares. I want to begin by just once again, as I did once before, talk about what happened this past year, and that when the Judge Scalia passed away, it was on February the 13th of the year. And the president nominated someone who was very qualified, and that individual couldn't get a hearing, a meeting, or be considered. And so we look back in history, and I've heard a lot said about it, but I'd like to put in the record the list of justices confirmed in presidential election years before the election. And in fact, there were 14. And after the election, there were another 3. And I'd just quickly like to go over it. President Washington made 2 appointments, Oliver Ellsworth and Samuel Chase, both in 1796, his final year. President Johnson in 1804 made 1, President Jefferson, Jackson, Cleveland made 2, Harrison made 1, Taft made 1, Wilson made 2, Hoover made 1, Roosevelt made 1, and Reagan made 1. 3 justices were actually nominated and confirmed after the election in a presidential election year. One was Abraham Lincoln's in December of 1864. The second was Ward Hunt, President Ulysses S. Grant in December of 1872. And the third was William Burnham Woods, President Rutherford B. Hayes's in December of 1880. So if one is going to look at precedent, one has to look at this piece of paper and say, maybe this is substantial precedent when 14 presidents have made appointments in the final year of their presidency, and an additional 3 even after the election takes place. So I think what's been used is a statement that Joe Biden made on the floor, which I've read. And that statement doesn't come close to what this piece of paper does. So you can imagine, perhaps, on our side, the depth of feeling that came about during this period of time. From March and April was plenty of time to handle a nominee. And yet the decision was made that President Obama would be denied his 4th year when 17 former presidents were not. And that's a fact. The other thing I want to express is something that in the 6 appointments I've sat on, I find without history. And that is the use of dark money in this nomination process and against Judge Garland. It's been reported that $7 million of dark money was spent to sully Judge Garland, and that $10 million of dark money was spent to promote Neil Gorsuch. Now, that's dark money. We don't know where it came from. We don't know how much was given. We don't know whether one individual put in all $10 million. The only thing I know of that is that the NRA put in $1 million. Now, that sends a loud signal to me. And I think that the majority, and I say this respectfully, needs to consider these things. I think that then when you have a nominee who won't answer a specific question, I remember when the question was asked about Plessy versus Ferguson, and the nominee said, yes, it's a dark stain on America's history. And then I think it was Senator Blumenthal that asked, well, do you support the Brown versus the Board of Education? And he wouldn't say. Now, Brown v. Education was the vote in terms of schools and fairness and desegregation. And anybody that's going to be in the Supreme Court, it seems to me, has to say, yes, I supported it. And when we look back at other nominees, Republican nominees, who would say when a verdict was passed, yes, I support that. So I just want to say these 3 things, more or less sort of setting the table for at least the way this senator feels about this. I never thought that, and you are eminently fair, and you know what I think about you, because I say it everywhere, and I very much appreciate your leadership, and I respect it. Having said that, this puts this side, in my view, in just a terrible position. And when you have this kind of dark money, you have reportedly 10 states targeted and millions spent. It creates a situation, I think, for a nominee that the people who spend this money by the tens of millions ought to think twice about. It may very well be counterproductive. And I just needed to say that, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you.
Thank you. I've already held over the nominations, so unless someone else wants to speak, we'll meet again at 10 a.m. a week from today. Meeting adjourned.
Okay.